Why does Danielle Strachman need to meet Kevin Leahy? This is Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube, officially a Panoptica joint. We're talking about, do you take young people seriously enough? And that matters for somebody who's got a crazy backstory in news reporting, then media, then NPR, now running his company, and Danielle, who's backing these 15 to 17-year-old founders now. We talk about having the intuition to just do something, intuition hunting. Love that word. Hope we see it in more places. And context, not just in humanities class in school, but sometimes not having context is really important. Sometimes all the context and how you fit it back into the world makes all the difference. You're going to love this conversation. You're going to love seeing these two meet. See if you can guess why I wanted to introduce them. Jack Forehand, let's roll some clips.
We were starting to see the early green shoots of this, what would become the major successes of that program. We worked with people like Vitalik Buterin, Dylan Field, Ritesh from Oyo Rooms, Laura Deming, before anybody knew who they were. They were all 17, 18, and 19 years old. And we also saw that investors did not take our young people very seriously.
I have to catch myself with that. I think I do kind of just knee-jerk, dismiss them a little bit. I'd say I have empathy, but I need to I could definitely do better at taking them seriously or being more curious about the young people that work for me.
We call this positive pressure at 15, 17. And it's you can tell when someone has that intense bug bite on them. They're like, oh my God, I have to do this thing, but I don't have the resources to do it. We want to see what they can do with that energy that they have.
I think sometimes having all that terminology, can distract you from what is it that I need to do next? All of a sudden you're backed into a corner.
By all VC metrics, is a top decile fund, and we had no idea what we were doing, and we didn't understand global macro. We just were super positively naive and we know who we want to back. And so we have this fight on our team of okay, we know that mindset really worked. So do we try to go back in time when we were very beginner's mindset? Or as the educator in me, do I want to say I've learned something and integrate that into what's happening? So it's this tension that we feel really deeply on our team.
I hear that story a lot from people of, I didn't know that I was doing this back then. Nowadays we would call it this. And there's some advantage in that. We're all doing something now that someday we'll look back on and say, oh yeah, I was clearly doing this. But the term doesn't really exist yet, or we don't even know it.
Kevin is oh yeah, I went out and did all these things that I wasn't supposed to do because I had this passion to do it. And to me, there's that resonance.
You would have backed young Kevin in some way.
100%.
I totally know it. I see all this great understanding of context and strategy. I just think the world needs more people like you guys in it. You're watching Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube. I'm Matt Ziegler. Shout outs to Panoptica. Shout outs to Epsilon Theory. This is the show where I take two strangers who have never met before, invite them into this thing blind, and we just press record. So who are they here today? You're about to find out. We're going to see if they can guess by the end why I wanted to pair them. We'll see if I got it right too, because I wrote down my answer on the back of the card. Let's not keep them waiting. This first guest, she was once a famous Craigslist tutor. And not Craigslist killer famous, but Lifetime Network. I am sure you are watching this. I know you are. This guest's Craigslist stories are maybe slightly less salacious, but I bet Billy Baldwin will say yes to being in this one too. So let's get that Baldwin rec out. And now I want to go on to this next. I want to shout out the color teal, whose brief 90s dominance has now been officially outlasted by other strangely 90s dominant but less color of the Florida Marlins, Peter Teal. Because this guest is plugged in there too, namely to not the Baldwin level famous, but the Teal Scholarship Fund, which was pretty famous in and of itself. She helped run that. She helped talk kids out of not going to college and helping, pay for them and fund them and cool stuff. And last part, you might recognize her from 1517, which in an alternate reality, that's the military time for 3:17 in the afternoon when most college dropouts start to get up. But in her case, 1517, all about the people who start startups, how to back them, and in a way more expansive attitude than the Teal scholarships, which even Peter Teal got behind. So yeah, friggin' cool. Straight out of California, by way of Massachusetts, the incredible, indelible Danielle Strachman. Welcome to Just Press Record.
Holy moly. That was amazing.
This is how we're rolling.
Matt.
My 1517 is 3:17 in the afternoon thing. I'm really proud of that. I'm just
That's really good. I'm like, wow. Someone a few minutes ago, we just got on a call with an old colleague, and he's like, oh, I'm so happy to be here with the 15, 17 teenagers. And I was like, amazing. Never been called that before.
See, it just keeps rolling out.
And
Danielle,
yeah,
I got to introduce you to this other friend who's here.
I was going to say, I'm so excited to hear Kevin's intro now.
This is what we're here for. Not a Craigslist tutor, but next best thing, a baby delivery driver, listening to the radio in his car, driving around, dreaming of one day being Howard Stern, because what says boundary pushing shock jock like Aaron Delivery Boy? Really? He probably just needed some startup funding, Danielle. I hope you're taking notes. But wait, there's more, because he did make the jump to radio, not to Stern, but to NPR, where I hear he's got stories like pitching Barack and apparently later Bitcoin. And there's stories here, so I want to hear them all, but save them for later, because on the way, Kevin realized radio had a new errand boy called podcasts, and he had a thing or two to help how they built that. That's an embedded reference, just for the record. If none of those things check out today, he's on point. Literally, he's the point man for all things podcast at Podcast Point Man, where he, one can only assume, combines his errand boy skill set with his love for radio style podcast production. And spoiler, he's become my go-to with questions on audio brand building, right next to my guy, Matt Russell. But of course, straight out of our nation's capital, sitting at the second most influential tiny desk in that city, never before has a man done so much with so little. It's Kevin Leahy. How we doing, Kevin? Did I get enough Howard Stern references in there for you?
That is from my cover letter that I wrote to get an internship at NPR.
Oh, wow.
Thought that was edgy to put that in there. And I think it was listening to 99% Howard Stern and 1% NPR at the time, but I made it sound a little more even in the cover letter. So.
This is an ultimate life hack, right? You got to punch things up a little bit.
Yep. I think that's what got me the internship. And recently I shared it with some people they opened that internship program back up. And I was like, in case anyone wants to see my cover letter, I think it's important to differentiate yourself. And like, I put that on LinkedIn and shared it and I was like, this is going to blow up. Like no one commented on it. Cause I'm like, everyone just uses AI to write their cover letters now. That was a differentiating skill back then. Like no more.
I wrote my job description for the Teal Foundation. That was fun.
Did you handwrite it?
I didn't.
Type it up?
I mean, I typed it up myself. Yeah. Like
the job didn't exist, and then you.
Well, we didn't exist, and at the end of the interview, I said, "Hey, listen, why don't I go home and write up what I think you need, and if you think I know what I'm talking about, hire me, and if you think I don't know what I'm talking about, don't hire me." So I wrote up my own like JD and what we would need to do over the next 6 months, and they were like, "Okay, you're on board." I still have it. It's like 1 or 2 pager, and I'm like, "Wow, that's wild."
It's fantastic.
I'm hoping we're going to dive into all those stories. I have one actual agenda, which is not a complete spoiler to why I got you together, but this is the inception of this. So Danielle, you got flagged by some of my VC friends when you were asking about podcast appearances and getting the Joe Rogans or whoever the Howard Sterns of podcasts are to like say yes to you coming on.
I'll take you, Matt, over any of those.
I'll take that. You're welcome here anytime. But I thought to myself, I have no idea how to get those people to say yes, but I do know at least one person who knows how to say no. And he's got some stories about just how to play that gatekeeper role. And I was like, man, I would be so fascinated by this. So Danielle, could you just give Kevin like a quick idea of what you're working on now, what you want people to say yes to? And then Kevin, can we run down like all the reasons people would be saying no to this or why it'd be getting rejected?
Okay.
Can we start there, please?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give a brief background. My colleague and I, Michael Gibson, were on the founding team of the Teal Fellowship program. That was in 2010 when I joined, was there for the first 5 years. We were starting to see the early green shoots of this, what would become the major successes of that program. We worked with people like Vitalik Buterin, Dylan Field, Ritesh from Oil Rooms, Laura Deming. Before anybody knew who they were all 17, 18, and 19 years old. And we also saw that investors did not take our young people very seriously. So my colleague and I left 10 years ago to work with Teal Fellows, other non-degreed people, and really scale that mission that we started at the Teal Foundation. So we have a venture fund that we do that with. And yeah, we back people super early. So that's like the short version.
Cool. And you're trying to... And are you trying to get them on shows?
Well, here's what's been funny. So yeah, someone tweeted out recently, like, Teal Fellowship versus YC numbers. And, you know, I can't say that the numbers on either side are actually like, oh yeah, these are super, you know, accurate or whatever. But it is very, very clear that the Teal Fellowship has had some extremely outsized returns in terms of the capital we were initially investing. And so then someone else retweeted and was like, why have you not been on like every single huge podcast? And I retweeted like, I don't know. I have no, and I was like, and I said something like, honestly, help. I have no idea how to get involved with these people. I think we have a really interesting story. I think our founders have interesting stories. It's very counterculture even today, the narrative. And that's how I ended up meeting Matt. And actually, yeah, I've been on this like podcast blitz for a couple of weeks now. I'm doing another one later today. And it's been great to get the story out there more broadly. And I also love having like an actual barstool conversation of like, yeah, let's just talk about like all kinds of stuff for a couple of hours kind of thing. And I was really amazed because like Twitter stepped up. I still call it Twitter for whatever that's worth.
It's worth something.
And yeah, exactly. True believers over here. But people stepped up and helped so much. And yeah, I've gotten to do some really amazing interviews with Molly and Ty and Matt. And they've been like, not only have they been fun from like a viewership perspective, but actually like really getting to dig on stuff and have really fun, nuanced conversations has been great. So yeah, I would love to be on more stuff, sharing this story. Michael and I are particularly dynamic together on these stories. And yeah, so that's where we're at. I think, you know, it's interesting. I think in society in general, we have this thing where when someone says they're doing something different, like not going to college or something like that, what other people hear is, well, my choice, you think my choice was bad. And so I think even for, you know, hosts of different things and stuff like that, it's hard to get into the nuanced thinking of like, hey, like one choice is not for all, or like there's many different ways to have a successful career in life. And we're weird. Like, we don't have this pedigree of like, oh yeah, used to work in finance, did, you know, I don't know, like I used to be a teacher and a school principal. I started a charter school, and my colleague was studying philosophy and was a journalist. So I also think there's sort of a disconnect of like, how do we tell a story here about these folks that makes sense to us when like, yeah, it's got like all these jumps and it's not a sense-making story. Oh,
We lost your
you're
audio.
muted.
Good etiquette, though. I'll edit this
up. It feels like the world is moving in that direction. You know, I work on one show that's about hiring and at big organizations, and you hear a lot of people talking about skills-based hiring and a move there, you know, in very sort of mainstream like companies, Fortune 100 companies, I would say. And I think they're recognizing that, you know, that I didn't know a lot of this stuff before I started working on this show, but the labor force is getting smaller. Like, you know, just, yeah, I didn't even really realize that the global labor force for a lot of jobs is getting smaller. So like these organizations just feel like they have to compete more and more. And they, you know, as education gets more democratized and more people like you are helping recognize that and like provide opportunities for people that don't have that pedigree. I think bigger organizations are trying to figure out how to harness that talent. So I feel like there's momentum behind that. And I sometimes look back at my own career and think like, you know, yes, I kind of got the pedigree stuff. I wanted to have that covered. But what really got me opportunities was like, no, I had the clips. Like I went out as a college student and did reporting on court cases locally and went to murder trials and covered them like I was a real reporter, just kind of pretending like I was doing the other stuff. And I think that's what stood out, right? Like there were plenty of Berkeley graduates that probably wanted some of the things I got, but it was like going and doing the work. And so I think that's super cool. And we can talk through some recent like case studies of getting on podcasts and how I think about that.
Well, and one thing, you know, you bring up, because for a long time, actually, one of the drums I've been banging on is that I think all of K through 12 actually changes when hiring practices change. And so the reason K through 12 is like geared towards like, and now you go to college and you go to this specific college is because that's what like hiring committees are looking for. And as soon as that starts changing, I think then like that actually has a huge trickle down effect on education. And I have to dig into this. One thing I learned about recently, my understanding is that there was a court case in the 70s because hiring institutions used to do more of their own assessments. And my understanding is there was like a big case where, and I don't know all the details really at all. I just know the high level of like a discriminatory case about the assessment types that they were doing. And so businesses stopped doing that because they're like, okay, we're going to get sued based on these practices. And so now we're going to use college as a proxy for these things because we're now like sort of deconstructing that assessment piece that we do to someone else and like avoiding litigation. It sounds like for your show, like it'd be interesting to cover some of that past history of, yeah, what happened there? Why are there ways to negate that now? Because it sounds like hiring institutions were like, we don't, I mean, and it makes sense too for in the 70s to be like, yeah, we're not going to be like, oh yeah, college is end all be all, because it wasn't like that.
And I'd always heard of college as a proxy for you know how to finish something. That was the line my parents always gave to me.
Right.
And it was just, yeah, everyone just accepted it. It's like, okay, you know, you can see something through. And I never really thought to think, well, like people like my brothers who dropped out of college or plenty of other people I know, were they finishing other things in their life? Like, they were finishing albums. My brother finished a novel when he was like 21 years old. So I guess I didn't think like, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, he couldn't finish college. But I don't know, if you look more holistically at the person, like if they're seeing things through and doing what they say they're going to do, that might have been seeing things through more than a lot of college students.
Yeah.
Oh,
very much. I love that. I mean, that's like portfolio based work of like, hey, here's the things I finished. And like, yeah, maybe college is one of those check boxes of something you finish and maybe it's not, but you could showcase other things that you've done. That's really, really interesting. Gosh, there was another thought that was coming to mind.
It's like I could finish something that kind of bored me.
Oh yeah.
That makes me bored.
Right.
Like that, that's like, and that's an attribute, I guess.
Like more of the like industrial corporate side of things of like, can you comply? Yeah. Can you comply and can you do things that a system wants you to do and buck it up and do it? And like for some companies, that's part of the culture and part of what you need to do when you're at a job is sometimes you got to buck it up and do a thing. And I think sometimes people lean on that. And lastly, the thing I was just thinking of is so many colleges and even, you know, hiring institutions will say like, oh, college prepares you with critical thinking. And it turns out actually when you test for critical thinking, like pre and post, there's no change. Like if someone was a good critical thinker before they went to school, turns out, okay, yeah, it's good. And it's like the same. And that
I think the worst grade I got in college was on a paper where I thought the most critically, like it went against the grain of what was being taught and the rest of it.
Yeah. I remember
checks out.
Dante Chaucer class. It was a grad class. I was an undergrad and I really like the Inferno. And I was like, I want to dive into this. And I remember sitting in the professor's office after like the first paper, I got a C or something like that. And I was like, I'm trying to understand like where I'm awry here. And one, he could not articulate that. And two, eventually I was just asking him like the checkbox questions, like, what do you want to see in the next paper? What is it that it is? And basically like the subtext was, I want to see you think the way I think. And it was like, I didn't think that's what this was supposed to be about. I thought it was that I'm going to have my thoughts. You might not agree with them, but can you at least judge me on like my thinking criteria and not if my thinking and your thinking are the same?
So quaint, Danielle. So quaint to have that view. Young college personalities. We all experience that. Can we drill into this specifically, Kevin? Like you and the whole courtroom reporting thing. Like that's like you weren't doing that as a paid go out and do this. You're just doing this because you were like, were you thinking about that as putting together a portfolio of proof? Were you proving it to yourself? What the hell was that?
Some of it was emulating my older brother, who was a reporter for the wire services, which are the
like the AP wire, like like that type of stuff?
And there would be, local ones, and they're really the ones that are doing the actual reporting that, the nightly news anchors read off the screen, right? They call the pretty people on TV are like, the anchors are just reading the stuff that some guy like was grinding out, right? And going and finding stuff out. So I thought that was cool. And I worked for, the Berkeley paper, which always prides itself on not just covering the university stuff. I really wasn't interested in that. I was way more interested in the city stuff. And you have Berkeley and Oakland that are right next to the university, and those two worlds collide sometimes with criminal stuff, sometimes with big lawsuits that affect a lot of people. So I just thought, man, I want to go out, and I guess newspaper was we're kind of like beginning the end at that time, 2006 and 7. So I kind of knew it was like the path of being a big city newspaper reporter wasn't the most auspicious one at that time. But I thought, okay, there's a lot of different ways we could take this, and I'll just learn a lot of stuff. And so I used to go, and I remember CBS 48 Hours was covering one of the cases that I was covering too, and I'm just learning from these people and learned a cool trick, and I kind of scooped them. At the end, I wrote the jury letters and said, if you want to talk to me about your decision in this case afterward, just give me a call. And the guy from the Oakland Tribune was sitting there, was just looking at me, you little bastard. I can't believe you did that to me. It embarrassed me.
What years was that? I live in Oakland.
2005 through 2009.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
All the Bay Area
and
love
all the
is
other
gonna come
kids
out. It's
at
gonna be great.
all the other kids at the paper were wanting, they did the leadership stuff for the paper, which God bless them, figure out the budget and, every day lay out the paperwork. And they were working 40 hours a week doing that stuff. And I was like, I don't want to work 40 hours a week and go to school. And I just didn't have the love for it like that. So I always stayed a reporter and could kind of do my independent thing, which was really, really cool and eye-opening.
Wow.
All right, Danielle, you have thoughts on this? Like making that choice to seek and play around with this thing. What the hell's going through your mind right now?
Play around with this thing, meaning
Like play reporter almost.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to belittle that, but it's
funny.
just
That's weird. Like, cause that is not how I am. That's not my like intake of this story. This story to me is like
even better.
Man on a mission, getting it done, doesn't care about like the bureaucratic angle or like, just has that like, yeah, like I'm just gonna do the job.
I'm
and
not
so
going to disagree with your interpretation of Chaucer here, but I am going to say it's fascinating.
Yeah, no, like, yeah, I think it's really amazing. And as someone who lives in Oakland, also, like, I'm very personally tied to it. And, I see what the Oakland side and the Berkeley side papers put out for things. And I'm like, hey, like, why is no one actually covering sort of East Bay? Like, what's happening across? And so I love, and I love the, like, sort of, I don't know, flagrant, if you will, hey, judge, you can reach out to me to, like, that is like the cojones move. That's like, wow, okay, awesome. I've never heard of a reporter doing that before, and I think it's really cool. And I think like we've lost track of actual investigative reporting. And like, I'm super fascinated that that's what you were doing in two very political, if you will, cities. To me, I'm just like, this isn't, you weren't playing reporter, you were being a reporter. I think there's plenty of reporters out there who are playing reporter, and what they're playing is like, hey, can I get noticed by a thing or a person or something? And you were like doing the actual genuine job of reporting, which, sad to say, like even more so today, very few and far between is that happening. I grew up in New England, and I still mourn the days of Chet and Natalie Curtis on Channel 5, who were boring. Oh, God. It was, like, so hard to watch the news as a kid. But now I'm like, oh, my gosh, like, where is the dragnet just the facts? Like, where is the information? And even today, I have a really hard time figuring out, like, well, what news sources are there certain reporters I want to follow? And so I love the, like, genuineness of what you were doing, even if to the establishment in journalism, they were like, oh, this guy's bucking the system and giving us that. I'm like, well, isn't that what real reporting is about?
And they were all like super nice. I think it was just more like,
yeah,
just kind of having a laugh, right?
Yeah.
So how do you understand it now, Kevin? Like, how do you look back on that as just a developmental moment? I'm really curious.
I'm really surprised looking back at the like courage I guess it took to do some of that stuff. I feel like I need to summon that at times now.
Did
And
it
I guess
feel like
I've done
courage
it.
at the time though, or did it feel like naivete or something else?
Yeah, it felt a little bit like naivete.
Yeah.
Like, and some of the moments are really funny looking back. Like I would go up to like a crime scene where it was like fresh because the guy who was before me taught me how to use a police scanner to like find out when stuff was happening in real time.
Yeah, so
This
cool.
guy was like next level. And so I like started to do that and like show up on a scene. And I remember a cop was like, whoa, buddy, like back up. And I was like, I'm a reporter. Or I'm a journalist or something. Like something
He's
like
like,
so
I'm telling you to
lame.
stand
And
down.
he was like, I don't care who you are, buddy. You're gonna back up. And I was so like a lot of things like that you look back on and it's pretty funny, like how innocent that is. But yeah, I think it was really I really at times I think it's always worth reconnecting with that, like going out. My brother, who's a stand-up comedian, always calls it getting outside your house, leaving your house. Like you have to go and leave your house. Like to be a comedian, you got to go in the club and like put in the reps and get, go through eat some shit. And my newest thing that I want to do, and I'm putting out there publicly now, is launch a local podcast where I live now. Because what I'm really craving is more connection with people. I walk around my community all day long, and I'm like, what's the story behind that business? What's the deal with this place? Even like some church or something that I'll never go to, but I'm like, what's the deal with that? And I would love to just sit down with people and have a reason to do that locally. And so I want to start a local podcast and just connect with interesting people.
You're giving me some ideas here of I've lived in Oakland for 13 years and in different neighborhoods, and I moved to the Lake Merritt neighborhood 3 years ago. I adore my neighborhood. Like there's people like me who have lived here just a few years, and there's people who've lived here for 30 years. And in the old neighborhood I was in, we had a little local paper that was just like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's a little piece about this business. We don't have that in my current neighborhood. And even little things like I was talking to a neighbor the other day, and he's sort of a renegade artist, and he has been spray painting. He's made these stencils, and he has been spray painting on the sidewalk, look both ways, because like people blow through red lights all the time in our area. And I have godchildren who are 8, 7, and 4. And I remember we were standing at an intersection. I looked down, it's like, look both ways. And I was like, hey girls, like teachable moment. And like, you got to wait until the walk light is on and still look both ways and then go, because people might blow through a red light. And I was talking to this neighbor and he's like, oh yeah, I made those. I was like, wait, you're the guy who's been spray painting the street? That's amazing. And it made me think, like, I really do wish there were a way to get out some of these stories in our neighborhood and make us like more close together about these things. And I'm like, oh man, do I want to start a little like neighborhood paper or something? Like that would be really, really fun. Or like find a group who wants to do that, because there's some just amazing stories that are happening right here locally. And I think we all get so obviously involved in national and global news and politics, but like there's so much happening at home that I love that you could lead the charge on the like local podcast. It's not something I've seen before. And I would love to listen to a local podcast of like, oh, they're going to interview Leaning Tower of Pizza down the street and like talk, like I would love to see like man on the street interviews around the lake, because there's all kinds of characters around Lake Merritt where it's like, who's this guy who's always here like teaching tree hugging and weightlifting? Like, let's talk to him. That is so cool.
I think like
this love.
Selfishly, within the next couple months, and selfishly, like if you want to just look at it as kind of elevating your own profile or having more relationships, like I feel like if you start a podcast now, unless you have an extremely unique premise like you do here with this show that I'll tell other people about, right?
Very unique.
It's kind of commoditized being like, I interview people in this space. Like it used like 5-10 years ago, it was like, oh, dude,
Right, that was not
like, yeah, and he's having an author on to discuss it. Now that author is going to go on like 10 or 20 podcasts probably. And so it's just harder to stand out as that, like, I just interview you, people and introduce, because I don't plan on coming into this podcast with a super strong point of view, and I don't want it to get like political or anything.
Sure.
But I think just by doing it in the local sense, like it does kind of elevate you. It's like, oh, that guy like did that, and he's the guy that, he must be doing something right. Like he must. So I think the local thing is super interesting and good for, it's a good business move too. I'm not really trying to get local clients, but who knows?
DC?
Yeah, DC, but a very specific.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it a specific neighborhood?
Yeah, it is, and it's right near a suburb that's right across the Maryland line. So it's kind of going to be those two communities together, which have the same name basically.
What's that community called?
Tacoma Park.
Oh, you become like the Tacoma guy.
Yeah.
People would know you as that. And
Yeah.
it's a benefit to the community and your brand, and it's like very symbiotic. Like, I think that's very
We
cool.
want to buy a house there. We may want to buy a fixer upper. So maybe I'll put the word out through that podcast. Like,
Yeah. Oh my God, 100%. Man, I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, oh, this is a whole thing. You could like help other people launch their neighborhood podcast and be like, hey, like, we've got this group. And then you could go to a podcast that's like, okay, cool. Oh, I'm moving to a location. Cool. I'm going to go
Here's
to
all
that.
your people.
Here's all your people. Yeah.
And
here's
it's
all the-
not Facebook.
Yeah.
Like here's a social media algorithm freed version
Yes.
of
Wow, man.
the contractor and the crazy lady selling pencils on the square.
No,
And,
totally. Have you started doing these like local podcasts already, or is it like coming up?
No, I've helped some clients kind of think through this type of thing. Like one guy who had a more generic show that just wasn't really cutting it, and it wasn't really fitting his goals. Like he wanted to connect with people locally, yet he felt like he needed to compete in this kind of, I would say, imitation of the biggest real estate podcast out there, the one I used to lead. And I was kind of like, why don't you just go directly to the people you want to connect with and just niche down? And so that's kind of a lot of times where my mind goes when I talk to someone. It's like, I want to build an audience of this type of person because I want to connect with them and do business. And I'm like, well, maybe you could just actually talk to them directly. talk to your prospect directly on the podcast, right? It's like, go
Yeah.
to them. Like,
God, that is so great.
uh,
I'm so
There's-
inspired by that. I'm so
thank you. I appreciate that. That's such
Yeah.
good feedback.
I'm going to send it to both of you afterwards only because Phil Pearlman, who's been on this show before, after he was on, started sending me these episodes. And I think it's called Hometown Friends. And this was the premise. It was just like a bunch of people from a hometown. So there was some broader reach from people when they were out. It's like, oh, so-and-so's back for Thanksgiving or something. But it was like this weird, very inclusive, extremely local people in a neighborhood just talking to each other and
I
figuring
love
out how to bring a person on and just do a non-offensive profile of what are you up to, what's going on, why is this interesting? And I remember looking at it and, okay, Kevin, for you, like there's no massive reach, there's no massive scale strategy, there's no monetization strategy you're tying to something like this.
No.
You're literally just saying like, I think this is of value for this community.
Sure.
Like, how do you unpack that? Do you just look at it as a hobby or a passion project? Do you unpack that in any other way? You've seen like the full range of this stuff. So I'm really curious how you think about this.
Yeah, I think if you were a local business, you could definitely make a business case for it and be more strategic with who you want to talk to. For me, it's more like my intuition is telling me so strongly that I need to do it, that I'm like, I can be as analytical as I want, but there's something there. Like it seems like my intuition is like stronger than, how I can talk myself. I could talk myself out of it in many different ways. Like, I don't have enough time for this. I'm trying to scale my business, and what a pain in the butt. But I feel like also for me, it's a little eating your own dog food, right? Like staying on top of podcasting stuff by actually doing it. And, I'm not going to be like optimizing it in the same way that we optimize our clients' shows and giving it that same treatment. But I think there's something to, being a practitioner and not just laying back and giving people advice. And especially if I'm leaning more into this relationship-based stuff in our business, which I want to do, this is the ultimate example to me. Is like, I had a goal. I wanted to connect with more people.
Yep.
I feel like my kids are they're toddlers, but they're growing out of that phase. And for some reason, I'm like, I almost want this to be a little time capsule in my life of like when they were little kids, I did this thing, or started it,
That's cool.
rather than just kind of like, I don't know, time goes by, the freaking business owner who I wanted to talk to like dies or goes away. Like, and that would be really sad to me. So it just feels like I have to do it.
One thing that comes to mind for me when I hear about this is like people get so stuck on thinking about ROI on things. And it's something I've been passionate about for a long time. Because in my heart, what I am is a community builder. And I've always been like this ever since I was a teenager, like leading clubs, mishmashing people together at parties, like all of this. And so we've done this a lot with the Teal Foundation and also with 1517. And what's funny, I feel really lucky that like Peter was not the type who was like, what's the ROI on that event that we spent $100,000 on, like this big summit we did? He's not like that, which is great. Because the ROI isn't like the Sunday at the end of the event of like, did people like it? Like the ROI is that you hear these narrative stories over time of like, these two ended up co-founding something. This one bought this person's company. And all these things I'm saying right now are things that have actually happened. This one met their girlfriend, like, whatever it was. And I've seen this so much over time. And, we host little things and big things at 1517. Like we just hosted a camp called Unplugged, getting people together. We do ice cream socials. We're going to go to Singapore and we're hosting an ice cream social there. And it's so funny. Even our own investors are like, what's the ROI on that event? And I'm like, no. The ROI is in like 3 years from now when someone says, hey, I started jamming on these ideas with this person at your camp and here's what's happened. And this reminds me of that a lot in terms of you're going to be interviewing people and making connections in the neighborhood. And the ROI for you personally alone is going to be huge because you're going to be more integrated into your home and into your place. And that ROI also is going to extend out to other people. But I think we tend to get really hooked on like, well, how many listeners did I have? And that's what matters. And it's like, no, like not with things that are community oriented. Like the ROI is so much bigger and longer term than any little piddly thing we want to measure right now.
And that's so crazy about the internet is like Hereticon. I had never heard of that.
Sure.
And then I heard about it on a podcast from someone that was invited to that, who I wouldn't, no one knows that I'm listening to this guy. It's kind of random. And then he has someone else on that was there. And then I check out her stuff. And just like the network, like there's no way someone could attribute all that stuff, even if you had the best tracking technology in the world, that I now know about that event.
Yeah.
And I've probably told people about it.
We had this funny moment when I was running the Teal Fellowship where we were in a review with one of our inaugural Teal Fellows. And he was like, oh yeah, so-and-so is going to like buy the product I built for $500,000. And we were like, whoa, wait a second. Like, this person who's going to buy it is a mentor in the program. Like, when did you two meet? And he's like, oh, he was walking by the foosball table at the social you guys did. And we started talking then we started meeting and hanging out. And like 3 months later, he's buying the product. And I was like, and part of me was a little exasperated, to be honest. I was like, how do we collect these stories? Because this is just the one I'm hearing about, let alone the ones I'm not hearing about. And it takes a long time to understand. And to your point, there's these ripple effects of like, oh, this bounces to that, bounces to that. And like, you're never gonna be able to track those things. But I find with these types of projects, there's like a faith-based component of like, you just got to trust that you're doing something, like you are doing something good and that the ripple effects will be good and that it's just worth it no matter any little number you try to like ascribe or something like that. It's funny, what's coming to mind is like, I don't know, someone being like, oh, what's my ROI on, my connection with a higher power or something like that. And it's like, well, you can't measure that either, like, but you still do it.
Yeah.
My God multiplier. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's an amazing thing. And Matthew Stafford, who was one of the people who said, Danielle, when you were asking that question of like, this is something you should get into with Danielle. Like Matthew's been hosting in the UK. He's a venture capitalist in the UK. It's been over a decade of hosting these 10-person like mini dinners that are just like, everything is private. This is just, we're going to get interesting people together, 10 people once a month, new people all the time.
Yep.
And he's like, you do that for 10 years and you see some crazy things.
You see some crazy, crazy stuff. It's amazing.
And you get pulled into crazy stuff. Only because I really want Kevin to hear this story too. Yeah. I think just like him in putting this together, I love this reporting idea and how much extra detail you put on what I sort of knew about this, Kevin. So now I feel like I owe this to you to get some of Danielle's story from like building this tutoring business after she moved across the country into this homeschooling thing that leads to the Teal Foundation. Because that's all micro community building. Like
Yeah.
you don't tell them what you did, because this
Sure.
is so cool and rooted in this thought.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it is back to that community building thing. This is one of the things that I love about talking to you, Matt, is like you bridge things that I haven't even like thought about before. Of like, oh yeah, this is part of that. Like hadn't actually like had a chance to talk about that, so I haven't like dug into thinking about it that much. But when I moved to California, my parents are both small business owners. And when I moved to California, it was 2003 to San Diego from the East Coast, from Massachusetts. And I was, Matt alluded to my Craigslist ads. This is before Craigslist was creepy I was like, it's funny, I didn't have terminology for this, but I was A/B testing ads without knowing what A/B testing ads was, doing things like that. And, sort of serendipitously, this homeschool mom reached out and was like, hey, I saw your ad. And actually, I had a website, and I didn't know anything about personal branding or anything like that. It just seemed very intuitive to me, I think because my parents ran businesses and they had websites. Oh, I should have a website for my tutoring business. In 2003, tutors were not doing this. Like, they may have been hanging a shingle and been like, call me, but like there was nowhere you could learn about them. So oftentimes people would reach out to me and said, oh, I read your website. I feel like I know you. I'd love for you to come over. Like, they'd be like, I'd love for you to work with my kids. Like not even an interview. And I was like, I want to meet you though. Like, I want coming into your home. Like, this is a big deal on both sides. But this one homeschool mom reached out, and homeschooling communities are, some of them are quite private. And I started working with this one family, 5 children in the family. And I was just blown away by these people. It was such a categorically different experience, because when I first launched my business, I was thinking, one, I didn't know how to like get niched in with homeschoolers and in these types of groups. I was very interested in alternative education, but didn't have like inroads. And so a lot of what I was doing was more on the homework help side, which meant, working with students. And I was trying to pair up what they loved working on plus cognitive styles, because that's part of my background. And then, getting through whatever they needed to get through. But it was tough because I'd go over and students would be like, oh, I got to do this homework and it's terrible. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Homework sucks. Like, I'm not into it either. But here's what we're going to do. And we're going to attempt in a 1 week, 1 hour session to try to get you back up to grade level, and you're 3 grade levels behind. Like, it's really hard. And then I would go over a homeschooler's house and they'd be like, oh my God, you're here. Can we do math and reading? Can you stay an extra hour and then we can do this history project? And I was like, who are these people? This is super interesting. And like getting in with a couple families led to me being part of like larger communities of homeschoolers. And eventually I worked with a secular group of homeschoolers who, this one woman, Kristen Kuglin, one of my best friends, at this point, I didn't know her actually at all at the beginning. She called me one day. I don't even know where she heard about me from. And she called me and she said, hey, I heard you teach creative writing. We'd love to have you come and work. It was predominantly boys in this homeschooling co-op. We'd love for you to work with them. They're about 10. Some of them have dysgraphia and like aren't even writing at all. And I'm on the phone and I'm thinking to myself, I could teach creative writing. I don't know where she heard that I teach creative writing, but yeah, sounds awesome. Let's do it. And I was like, oh yes, sure. Yeah, let's go. I was mostly tutoring math, so I have no idea where she got this writing meme, but I was like, yeah, this is doable. Started working with that group of homeschoolers, loved it. And that turned into Christine and I starting a charter school in San Diego called Innovations Academy. It's based on homeschooling principles. We were growing it out of this idea, and we didn't have startup terminology like scale. Like, this was it's almost 19 years ago when we were writing the charter petition. We opened the school 17 years ago, and now we serve 450 young people in San Diego, K through 8. But a lot of it, to your point, Matt, is like this community building of, hey, like there were the individual homeschoolers I was working with, which led to working with groups of homeschoolers, which led to, hey, can we take some of this embedded pedagogy and philosophy, and can we serve more people? Because 17 years ago, we'd hear from a lot of people who wanted to homeschool, especially single moms, and they were like, oh, I love this, but I don't even know how to get my kid dropped off to like the house where we were doing, and it was awesome. It was literally like my friend Christine's house and her garage that she, converted into a schoolroom where we'd do like lessons and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, if you were a single mom in San Diego, that was going to be much harder to do. This is pre-smartphone, so pre like life being easier with apps and whatnot. So we started the school to have a part-time and a full-time component for parents who wanted to be part of this community, but in a bigger way, and also be able to support them with something that didn't cost them money. Because we also thought about, are we going to be charter? Or are we going to be private? Pros and cons to both. And we were like, we want to be charter because we think that, it's important for anyone to be able to enroll and not have to think about the finance piece. But yeah, a lot of that is like community building. I'll still never, ever forget. My co-founder and I used to pass each other in the hallway of our school the first year. And every time we passed each other, we would just whisper, who allowed this? Like, who allowed us, just these two sort of random, passionate people, to start this school? And that year, 8 charter schools started. We're one of 2 that still exists. And we also didn't really understand the like global macro stuff that was going on in 2008, and had to make it through the financial crisis and everything. But yeah, a lot of it was built out of like community engagement and what we thought the community wanted and needed.
What was your own educational background like? Did you have any untraditional?
So like, yes and no. Mostly no. Like I went to public school. I mean, I still don't know. I'm not super into labels. And clearly my parents weren't either, since I was not properly evaluated for any of these things, but I suspect I have ADHD and or dyslexia and or combos of both. Like school was hard for me. Reading was hard for me. What was funny was that I was the kid who liked to stay in during recess so I could help other kids with their homework. So this like want to teach and support was extremely inherent. And I think the applicability of I need to learn this because I'm going to help someone else with this was super motivating for me, rather than just like, oh, I mean, I definitely went to like, open this page in the book. We're going to do these pages today. But the thing that I think was maybe different, and I am so thankful to my parents for, is that I did music lessons really early on. I grew up with a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. But I started playing clarinet early, which led into taking clarinet lessons privately. And what was interesting was that I had multiple teachers just teaching one-on-one, an hour a week kind of thing. I had one teacher who you could tell was teaching because he needed the money and hated teaching. And I actually quit lessons for a little while, maybe a year. I was still playing, but just not taking private lessons. And then this new teacher messaged my mom, or called my mom, and was like, hey, I see Danielle's on the roster for band, like, but she's not in private lesson. I started private lessons with him, and he was really amazing and wonderful. And like his heart was in it. And so I got this interesting experience of like one-on-one tutoring, essentially, through music lessons, and being able to see that like the message and the medium matter. And this also goes into when I was older. I started taking like guitar lessons, in my like very late teens, early 20s. And that teacher was like, he actually practiced like Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, and he was essentially teaching it through the guitar. And like, it was sort of this like under the radar thing. And I was like, what is this? This is amazing. So I had a lot of interesting experiences with teachers one-on-one that I think very much influenced. Like I'll never forget with my guitar teacher, if I came and I was like, oh man, like I have not had time to practice this week. He was like, cool, no big deal. Like we'll just start from where we are. And I had like that first music teacher was always like, oh, you didn't do the thing, blah. Like I was like, I don't even want to do the thing, like, because you're not making this feel good for me to just be a human. And so it was interesting to get those experiences. And I think those experiences did shape, those experiences shaped that I knew something could look different. I think had I not taken music lessons, I would have just gone through public school and thought like, oh, here's how it works. And one other story that's coming to mind is in my senior year of high school, there was a team taught class between the English teacher and the history teacher, and it was just called Humanities. And what was interesting, it was the first time I was in a team taught class. It was the first time the class integrated subject areas, and I loved it. I was like, oh my God, things in context of what's happening, and not just like we're reading this book and we're not getting the context of the history that it was written in. And there was actually a lot of free choice in that class. And so, the teachers would literally lay out books on the table. Like, whatever of these books you want to read, just pick one. And I was like, whoa, I've never gotten to make decisions like this. Or I had an art teacher in high school who was retiring and was basically like, I'm out to lunch and retiring next year. Whatever you guys want to do, here's the materials, here's the space, let's go. And I'm like breaking away from the curriculum. And that was an incredible experience to have. So I feel like there were these like breakaway moments of teachers doing something interesting, but I didn't have the context of like, wow, this is really like, I could feel that it was novel and different, but I didn't know within the system that they were working in that it was novel and different. And only in hindsight did I recognize that. And that had an influence again on, something can look different. I'm not sure what. And then when I knew I was starting a tutoring company, I read as much educational philosophy as I could get my hands on, which was funny because, I'm still not a good reader. But when I have like a real purpose for it, I was just eating books. I was like, wow, this is like, I was experiencing myself in a different way, reading Montessori and John Holt and John Taylor Gatto, and just like waking up at 5 a.m. because I was excited to read about all these different takes on education.
Yeah, pedagogy.
Yeah, I know. I was like, whoa, there's this thing called pedagogy, and it's amazing.
How's that make you feel, Kevin? I mean, do you see similar through lines to like the stuff you're doing today with the podcast and the media company and like some of those foundational building blocks of maybe even the courtroom reporting, or maybe that's some of it too, like understanding how to package these facts up as stories? Are there those? Do you have those through lines too?
From like my own earlier days or earlier education to what I'm doing now, or from Danielle's story?
I mean, I'll take from either. I'm really curious from you though. Like, do you see those roots? Are they obvious to you now?
I was trying to think back to moments that remind me of like what you were just talking about, where you're like, oh, there could be a different way here. I used to just go off on my own and draw like a lot when I was a kid. And I think that was a way.
What did you draw? Give us specifics. What were you drawing?
So you remember Stussy?
Yeah.
All right.
Like the clothing company,
I would draw
the logo.
I recently taught my kid how to draw Stussy. I posted on Instagram, and someone from my 3rd grade class was like, yeah, I remember you used to do a lot of those. But I would start with like one thing like that, right? Like some pattern. And then I would like start to build that into some elaborate, like use like 50 other Stussies to create like a man made out of Stussies with hair. Like, I mean, that I wasn't one trick pony with that, but I would start with some little pattern like that and then blow it up into this crazy, crazy thing. And I really do enjoy working on things like that for a long time. And so I've tried to reconnect with that recently, because I do feel a bit like I'm jumping around a lot in the stuff I do these days, and go on this client call and then try to do some more deep creative work and then do some marketing stuff. Like it's a lot compared to, I think the way I'm naturally wired is to work on one thing for a longer period of time. But I was trying to think back to like teachers like that that just came at it from a different perspective. And I definitely had some good ones. And then I think once you discover podcasts and YouTube, that world kind of opens up even more. And it's like just kind of completely opens up.
Way different than pulling out a book when you can jump on YouTube and say, how do I actually do this? Whether that's fix your lawnmower or I don't know, learn how to price an option or something obscure.
I fixed my washing machine over the pandemic when like no one was going anywhere or having anyone in their house. And I was like, YouTube it is. And I felt so proud. I was like, yeah, I fixed my own washing machine. Incredible.
It's an incredible
I think, I was like trying to go to, I'm always trying to go to bed earlier. I'm like that person that's just like, if I could just go to bed
Been your
earlier,
club.
everything would fall into place. And
Same.
my
Yeah,
wife was
yeah.
like, why do you think it is that, you have these nights where you stay up till midnight or 1 a.m.? And it's not that, I don't think that it's that I'm wired that way. I think what it is I have all these curiosities that I want to explore. And I feel like that's my time. Now that I have less time than that forever, it gets pushed to that. I've heard people call it like revenge, bedtime procrastination
Yes.
or something. It's like your time. But my time with that stuff is just spent going down crazy rabbit holes, listening to like air traffic control, transmissions on YouTube and people breaking down, airline disasters and just like stuff that has it's not instrumental in my life in any way. I'm not going to use it in any way, but it's just like scratching that itch of like, I want to know how this thing works. And so that's kind of like, those are the two things that I do that I really enjoy that don't,
I want to drill into this part of your arc too, because like when you're at NPR and you're helping make this shift into the podcast space, you have this traditional radio model that's already established. They realize podcasts are going to be important, and you're part of the how I built this story. Like you're a part of it, whatever, however you want to define that part. But like, what was that change? You were in the middle of it. What was that like?
So the truth of it is that when I was at NPR, I was a machine at like producing the content itself, but I didn't know anything else that was going on. I didn't know anything about the marketing. I didn't know about the funding, because that's the way
amazing.
that type of huge organization is organized. Everyone specializes completely in their stuff. And so I did everything that was related to getting the show on the air. I would pick the music. I would direct the live broadcast in the studio, telling the engineer what to do, the person at the board. I would mix the pieces. I would edit the interviews really fast. I went on reporting trips. I did all this stuff, but I had no idea, like, where's all the like money coming from and what's this and that? Like, how does the whole thing operate behind the scenes? So really my decision to leave NPR had something to do with the fact that I just never felt like I would get any understanding of like all that stuff unless I went somewhere maybe in the private sector where they had to really figure that stuff out. And I was thrown into that startup life in the first job that I took after NPR and learned so much about that stuff. I just remember, and talk about naivete, looking back, I got the job because I had this podcast experience as part of the team that launched Up First, NPR's daily news podcast. But again, I was working on the creative side. I was, creating the audio stuff. I kind of got this job by being like, hey, I'm the podcast guy. I know all the marketing stuff and like ad stuff. And, I had to learn all that once I got on the job. But I remember the host of the show, who was also our webinar host, who was selling tons through this webinar every week. He was like, hey, if you can just find a way to promote those webinars and the podcast, you'll more than pay your salary. Like you'll be worth your weight in gold if you can just do that. And I asked him something really naive, like, and why are those webinars like so important? Or like, what is like the ultimate goal with those? And he kind of was like, that's how we sell our memberships. And like, at the end, like I asked people to, and it was just like stuff like that, but that was foreign to me coming from age 23 through age like 30 or 31, just being hyper focused on journalism, taking the information in, packaging it into stories, getting it out, not thinking about digital marketing and why email lists exist and just a lot of the stuff that maybe we all take for granted now. So I think my journey was more about that, going from that hyper specialized role to like, all right, now I have more tools in the toolkit. And that led me kind of back to Guy Raz and how I built this when I started working more with him, is I think that he wanted someone that understood that side a little bit more, like someone who can work with the partners that handle the money stuff and the ad stuff and kind of having a holistic view of a media organization rather than just a very simple-minded one of what's the best content. I'm not going to worry about how much it costs, or I'm not going to worry about managing the team or whatever.
Have you, flying in blind to this, I don't know where things are at now, but I'm really curious, like, have you innovated on the business model? Like, because of coming from the, like, hey, I was doing sort of like the the pure act, if you will, of journalism and not thinking about the business side of it. But then like you obviously got deep in that side. And so do you do things like sometimes at 15, 17, we call things the 15, 17 way because we haven't seen someone else do them. And I kind of wonder if there's like a Kevin way that you're running the business side of this.
Kevin way. I like this.
Yeah.
And I don't think so. I think it comes down, I was just talking to someone about this today. It just comes down to whatever the goal the podcaster is trying to accomplish. So getting back to our thing about relationship driven podcasts, whether that's a B2B podcast where they just want to get in a conversation with a particular type of person and start that relationship off on the right foot, or really actually listen and understand what that person's talking about, like in a context where that person's going to get something out of it and like co-create content with someone. That could be a goal. Someone else might be trying to convert their audience that they already have to an offer and get them to opt into something or actually buy something from them, right? There's tons of people out there with big audiences, but they can't figure out how to monetize. And then there's of course like audience growth itself, which is most people's goal. And that's going to come down to, do you know who your audience is? Like the actual ideas for the content, which people surprisingly neglect a lot of times and like just worry about the window dressing on it. But like, what is your idea for the episode? What is the YouTube thumbnail going to look like? Can you start that? Can you back that up so you're thinking about those things beforehand? Probably the most innovative thing that I did was at this Bigger Pockets, this real estate and personal finance organization that had a huge back catalog of blog articles that were pretty evergreen still, but very useful. We did something where we had a professional voice actor read the articles and he would batch record tons of them. So this guy had a great voice, great delivery, and he wasn't charging that much for his time and he could rip through a bunch.
Wow.
And then we launched that as a daily podcast.
Oh, wow.
And then that went out and it was very systemized. Like we would rotate the introductions that he had. We would run dynamic advertisements so that we could run campaigns. So it was kind of like, I felt really good about it because it was like generated an income stream kind of out of thin air. And it didn't have any of the messiness that you have with public podcasts that involve people that have their own goals and their own egos, and they are changing like we all are. And so it's really hard when you have these podcasts that like the host is growing out of the thing that got them success. And they're wanting to talk about higher level stuff. But the stuff that does well on the podcast is beginner stuff. And so it's like, what do you do there? The audience has grown attached to that person, or, you have to get rid of someone for some reason. Then you have to announce it publicly on the podcast. It's very awkward. Like one of my favorite podcasts just went through this. And so this was kind of like a nice way to be like, all right, we just have like this systemized little thing that didn't exist before.
This is all exactly why I needed Kevin to be on this so that we could showcase all things like media, content strategy. He's seen so many of these cases and that was awesome. I'm so happy you answered that. I have some notes and I can't run out of time without notes. So this is just how we roll. I have to ask, and Danielle, you said this right at the beginning here. Investors didn't take young people seriously. Kevin, the question is for you. Do you take young people seriously? Do you take them seriously enough?
I have to catch myself with that. I think I do kind of just knee jerk, like dismiss them a little bit. I will say I have a lot of empathy for them, especially if I look back at COVID, like the timing of my life. A lot of lucky things fell into place with like remote work came in and COVID came in just as I was settled down. I had met my mate. I had developed my skills already in the workplace, right? Like I had seen all the face-to-face stuff and worked for 8 years in person. And then I look at people that are just like, happen to be born like 8 years younger than me. And I'm like, or 10 or 12. And I'm like, shit, they just got shafted, right? And unless they were really persistent in going out and finding those like in-person opportunities or just finding the information another way, I'm like, I don't know how I would have like turned out if I was in their position. So I'd say I have like empathy, but I need to like, I could definitely do better at like taking them seriously or being more curious about the young people that I work for, that work for me rather.
I love that answer. And I love the high empathy response to that. I think that's actually a super important detail. Danielle, I've got one from you from something that he said. So number one, shout out to your brother and the you have to leave your house to be a comedian line, because that is just
So great.
that's so good. But you also made this comment, and it was when we were talking about the local podcast stuff, about the intuition to just do it. And I feel like, Danielle, this is like all the people you back with 15, 17 and everything else. It's like
100%.
you're an intuition hunter. Like that's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's true. I mean, there's this, and I've certainly felt this myself in certain ways, where you have this hunch about something and the hunch will not leave you alone. And it becomes this extremely intense itch to scratch. And I think some of this leads into, Kevin, what you were talking about, of like that late night diving into topics and things like that, where you're like, okay, it's 9 o'clock, should probably be like winding down, but instead you're like winding up because, the brain is like, but what about this random thing that
I'm excited about, because
that
I've been bored all day and now air traffic control.
Yeah. And so, we are definitely intuition hunters at 15, 17. And the thing we think about is like, hey, we're here to give you resources so you can test your intuition. Like, go test that. And like, sometimes this is a small grant we start with. Sometimes it's an investment check. And what's interesting, I think, about that intuition hunting is that like you can tell when someone has that like intense bug bite on them. They're like, oh my God, I have to do this thing, but I don't have the resources to do it. We call this positive pressure at 15, 17. And it's like, it's like very obvious. Like when you're sitting with someone and they're like really chomping at the bit. Sometimes we also call this dog on a leash energy. It's like a dog on a leash doesn't need food put down in front of it, doesn't need water put down in front of it, really doesn't want obedience school either. What they need is to be cut from the leash and being like, okay, now you can go do your thing. And so that energy component of like what someone is bringing to you, you can really tell like, wow, this is something this person is like willing to die on their sword for, or has this intense passion. And we want to see what they can do with that energy that they have. And it's so fun. It's so fun. And yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm making business cards because we're going to Singapore on Sunday. And, I have like the official title at the top of the business card, like co-founder and GP of 1517. But then I have a secondary title on there, which is professional fairy godmother, because that's what I feel like my job is. I get to like be like, bing, you get some resources, and, you get the pumpkin and the carriage and the shoes, and like, go do your thing. And like, let's see what happens at midnight. But it's just a ball to be able to do that for people.
Well, here's I think I already said this to you. Yeah, the bibbity bobbity boo thing is like,
yes, we talked about that. Yeah,
you got to land it somewhere. All right,
100%.
So I'm directing this at you, but I have to shout out this: return on investment does not ever beat return on foosball. I think like return on foosball should be on something. That's a good one.
That was the highest leverage foosball game ever. I'm sure it wasn't like, I don't know, maybe one of them was super good at foosball, but I suspect not.
It was just a foosball game, but the return on foosball,
conversation starter. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I also love, and I'm going to be wondering for a while, is basically homework tutoring help really just the murder case reporting of the school system. But that's one for you to think about at 8 o'clock or midnight or whatever time you're falling asleep. So Kevin, the question for you: Danielle was explaining with the tutoring business how they didn't have any startup terminology. Like here she is now, she can rattle off all these terms. She could tell us about a cap table and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Then none of this. Yet she builds this incredible thing.
Yeah.
Is being naive important in this way?
There's a guy I follow, really like a mentor of mine. His name, I want to give him a shout out. His name's Jay Akunzo. And he talks a lot
Jay's
about, yeah, you know Jay.
Yeah,
he talks about best practices, right? So I'm reading his book right now, and he talks about how caught up people get in best practices that you forget to just follow, not just your intuition, but literally just thinking about like your situation and not trying to map someone else's situation onto yours, and just thinking like, how do I accomplish, how do I take the next step based on everything in front of me? And so I think sometimes having all that terminology, can distract you from like, what is it that I need to do next? Like, because you start thinking about, do I need to, what's my go-to-market strategy? And then all of a sudden you're backed into a corner of like, there's these different go-to-market strategies, instead of just thinking about the problem in a more straightforward way. So I think also the more terminology, the more kind of like you can just get caught up in research and, what if I do it this way, and overthinking things. So I hear that story a lot from people of, I didn't know that I was doing this back then. Nowadays we would call it this. And I think that's what you were doing there. And there's some advantage in that. Maybe we're all doing something now that, someday we'll look back on and say, oh yeah, I was clearly doing this, but the term doesn't really exist yet, or we don't even know it. Yeah.
I love that, and I love it. And I just want to kick one more question to you before we play the magic guessing game, Danielle. He told that story about being a machine and yet figuring out he's just like a cog and he has no idea how the rest of the machine works.
Right.
It's kind of an extension of what he just explained. I feel like there's actually some value in like becoming a machine inside of a bigger machine that eventually you wake up to. Like, you have to master that core function first and then realize you in the humanities course, context.
Yeah, I think context is really important. I don't, like, when I think about our charter school opening in 2008, I did not have the context as a then 28-year-old of like, what does it mean that people are losing their houses right now? Like, I knew on the individual level what it meant for
curse you, fractional reserve banking.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was totally blind to it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it's interesting. It seems in hindsight very lucky of like, okay, I'm glad I wasn't doing my individual tutoring business, because I probably would have lost a bunch of my customers at that point. For me personally, and of course, even worse for them personally. But I think context is really important. And as an investor, this is something where it's like our edge is always trying to butt up right against what's happening with global macro, given that we work with really early stage founders. And so it's this super intense learning curve that's always going on. And once you think you've learned something, the market changes and it's like, booyah, guess what? Learn this new thing now. So now I'm like much more savvy to, you have to like be in your context also. But that said, I will also say our fund one is like, by all VC metrics and return on actual capital, is a top decile fund. And we had no idea what we were doing, and we didn't understand global macro. We just were super positively naive and like, we know who we want to back. And so we have this fight on our team of like, okay, we know that mindset really worked. So like, do we try to go back in time when we were very beginner's mindset? Or as the educator in me, do I want to say I've learned something and integrate that into what's happening? So it's this tension that we feel really deeply on our team. So I think both matter. And what I don't really understand is like, when do you choose to dip into one side of the pond versus the other?
I love that explained as tension too much, not just because I'm a music nerd, but it's right there. It's really cool. Tension and resolution.
Yeah.
Danielle, wrong answers welcome. Why do you think I thought you needed to meet Kevin?
Gosh. I mean, I think there's like sort of like I think there's like a top level and a bottom level. I think there's a top level of Kevin has done so much in media and in this world, and there's a lot to learn there and understand the context of what happens. But I think the deeper level to me is like, Kevin is a 15, 17er at heart. Kevin is like, oh yeah, I went out and did all these things that I wasn't supposed to do because I had this passion to do it. And like, to me, there's like that resonance.
You would have backed young Kevin in some way.
Well, 100%.
Totally
yeah.
know it.
Yeah.
Kevin, it's the same question for you. Why do you think I wanted you to meet Danielle?
Oh, I think, I think that she's a community builder. She knows how to get a team, oriented toward a mission. And figure something out, which is very relevant to me with my own team as well as my clients. And I think that she does that without like losing her soul, right? Like she's got a lot of like she's not just all right numbers, like it's all about that. Like we're all just all analytical side. I think there's some kind of emotional or intuitive side as well, which I really appreciate.
I love that. And I also love, I felt like I was going to be really, really wrong on this. And I feel like we're all kind of now circling around it. So I said, give people something to talk about, something good and positive, and the world gets better. And I think I look at both of your work and that's what I see. I see like all this great understanding of context and strategy. And I know you both had to earn your way into being able to even think that way.
Yeah.
But validated by Kevin in the grassroots podcast movement you're thinking about starting, and validated all the way by Danielle because she's got these 15-year-olds doing wonderfully wild things and being like, how about I give you money for that? And let's see how far we can take this crazy idea, because I just think the world needs more people like you guys in it. So Kevin, awesome. People want to find out more about you, bug you on the internet. Where should they look you up these days?
Yeah, they can look me up on LinkedIn, or they can go to podcastpointman.com.
Danielle, same question. They want to bug you on the internet, pitch you to Joe Rogan. Where do they find you?
They find
We'll
me.
talk about that offline.
Twitter.
Okay.
They find me at 1517fun.com. And I always freely give out my email, Danielle at 1517fun.com, especially if you're a young person working on like, and you're irrationally passionate about something. I want to hear from you.
It's a wonderful thing. You're watching Just Press Record, a Panoptica joint. I'm Matt Ziegler. Like, subscribe, comment, all the things below. Check me out on cultishcreative.com, and we are out.
Amazing. Thank you as always, Matt. So fun.
So fun.
Super fun. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great.
Seriously,
so
not letting me hurt the stuff.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I appreciate you guys doing this. I'm going to send an email introduction to both of you.
Cool.
So you guys can have each other, but I just think like you definitely should know each other anyway. So
Yeah. No, this is awesome.
Whatever follows. Guys, thank you so much. I'll talk to you. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Ziegler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.